Hi everyone, I am Devah Koure and I am now live with a new podcast. Oh my gosh, it's so good to be doing this. Can't believe I just hit the go live button. This is crazy. So some of you may be on here who might have seen me on a previous podcast with Josh, and Josh and I decided to end that one, but I didn't have enough and wanted to, wanted to do one. Still wanted to do one. And what this podcast is going to be for me, it's going to be about the things that are very personal to me and have been on my spiritual journey and my spiritual growth, and how I may be able to, you know, use my journey and use the things that I've gone through and the process that I've been through to help other people. And I mean, what else can you do with it, right? Why else experience it unless we can all learn from it, unless we can all grow from it collectively? And so that's a big part of it for me. And one of the things that I'm hoping will happen is that people will say hi in the comments, so I know that you're here. I'd love to hear from you guys. And also, I'm hoping that over time, people feel comfortable asking questions about spirituality. They can be questions like, how do I meditate? They can be questions like, what do you think happens to us after we die? Anything, any type of spiritually related questions, I would love to answer. And what I'm planning on doing is answering them after I've gone through the topic. So would love to see those questions in there. Would love to just see, hello and how are you, and make sure that people can actually hear me. That's always a good thing with this. I did test it ahead of time, so hopefully people can. And yeah, so let me get started. So for me, I should probably introduce myself for those who weren't part of the other podcast. So my name is Devah Koure, and I have been doing spiritual healing, psychic work, channeling for several years now, and just really have been growing my own awareness and my own connection with the universe in a very personal way. And one of my values, one of my personal values is, and something that I say to others, is that the best thing that we can do for anyone is to work on ourselves, right? The best thing that we can do for the world, for the universe, for our kids, for our spouse, whatever, is to do our own personal work. And so one of my values has been doing my own personal work. And I have been for, really, I would say probably my whole life, but I definitely ratcheted up in the last couple of years. And that's come from a place of living intentionally. That's come from a place of choosing who I am. And so what do I mean by that? What do I mean by choosing who I am? What do I mean by living intentionally? It means that in each moment, in every single moment of my life, I attempt to make the conscious choice of how I'm going to react or respond to what has happened in my life. I'm going to attempt to choose consciously to be aware of my emotions, to be aware of any triggers that are coming up, and to take care of myself, to nurture myself, to nourish myself, so that way I don't project those emotions, those triggers onto other people. And I do the work of healing myself. I heal myself, physically. I heal myself emotionally and mentally. And sometimes those aren't always as separate as you think, right? Sometimes we store trauma, we store emotions, we store feelings in the body. And so I'm very intentional about how I'm healing, about how I bring those things up, about how I present myself to the world. And in each given moment, yesterday my car got a transmission issue, and now I'm going to need to get a new car because it's very old. I can't, at this point, it wouldn't make any sense to just replace the transmission. And so at any given moment, in that moment of the car having the transmission issue, sorry, I think I want to mute there for a second. At the moment of the car having the transmission issue, I could choose how I was going to respond. Was I going to be frustrated? Was I going to be angry that I had to get a new car? I was a little bit sad. I was a little bit sad because I've grown to love that car. You know, as it's taped up, y'all. This thing has Gorilla Tape. The front bumper is being held up by Gorilla Tape. I have not been able to drive it on the freeway in years. I just drive it on city streets. She does not want to be taken outside of town. You guys, it is time for a new car. I recognize that. The car recognizes that. We're all in a state of recognition that the car needs to be replaced. And yet, I was sad. It was like I was losing a friend. But I was conscious of being sad. And I didn't, react from a place of being sad. I just allowed myself to feel sad. I allowed it to be the statement of what is. This car has, had a long life, and now it's time for its own retirement. And I can accept that, and I can accept my feelings about it, the feeling of sadness. So I'm accepting my feeling of sadness about it. And then I allowed that to move through me instead of bottling up, instead of sticking to it, right? I allowed it to move through me. And then, in doing so and allowing it to move through me, today has been an exercise in becoming comfortable with buying a new car. Not new, but new for me. Becoming comfortable with buying a new car, becoming comfortable with a monthly payment, becoming comfortable with whatever those things mean, and whatever this next phase is. And so recognizing the emotions behind that, there's anxiety. Am I going to find the right car for me? Am I going to find what I need? So when I say choosing who we are, I literally mean in every moment. What is my responsibility to myself in this moment? Am I being responsible to my own feelings? Am I being accountable to my own feelings and my own reactions and my own triggers? Am I seeing the world as it is, or am I trying to make it something that it's not? Am I forcing something through, or am I allowing it to just be and just be okay? Right? And so that's really what I want this podcast to be about. That's really what I'm looking for as part of this. Because for me, right? If I can be in a constant state of choosing who I am, if I can be in a constant state of being accountable to my emotions, to my responses, then I am a much better person for myself. I am choosing to be the highest vision of who I am, right? I mean, it's such an incredible gift that I not only give to myself, that I'm giving to everyone else. Because how many people actually choose to be completely 100% accountable and transparent about exactly who they are, where they're coming from, what emotions they're feeling, what work they're doing on themselves, right? And we can give that to others. If everyone was doing that, just imagine how special the world would be, how absolutely beautiful the world would be. And we could sit here and we could say things like, yeah, that's pie in the sky, that's utopia. We may never get there. But we may get there if 10% of the people, begin doing that. And then 20% of the people begin doing that, because people are going to see from you, from your example, from choosing who you are in this moment. And so one of the things that I'm really hoping to do each week with this podcast is talk about, specific topic and how it relates to choosing the highest vision of who we are, how it relates to our value system. So I'm really hoping to go into that. And I'm seeing a lot of comments. It is so good seeing everybody here. Welcome, everybody. I just feel very loved, and I'm sending a lot of love to all of you. So with all that said, so again, if you guys missed the very beginning, I would love it if you, have any spiritual questions. They could be things like, how do I meditate? What do you think happens to us after we die? Anything, any kind of spiritually related questions. Hey, what's a good crystal for such and such? I may even have those ideas. Would love to be able to help you out with those. feel free to write them in here. And then at the end, when I go through the topic of the day, I will definitely do my best to answer the questions. But right now it's really awesome to see so many people in the comments, and I love that people are watching. So thank you all for showing up. All right. So today I wanted to talk about pain and heartbreak and how they are used for our own personal growth. What happens when we're experiencing pain and heartbreak? What is our responsibility to experiencing pain and heartbreak? You know? So I really want to go into that. And so I wrote a couple of notes. I'm going to occasionally look down, but not too much. Not too much, I promise. So one of the things that we think about with pain and heartbreak, right? We think, somebody leaves us. And I'm not talking about physical pain, although physical pain can definitely be impacted by all the things we're talking about here. But if you are having physical pain, while there are sometimes energetic or spiritual reasons, it is always 100%, 150% a good idea to go get that checked out by a qualified medical professional and do the work of the qualified medical professional. I am not a doctor, right? So I'm really focusing on, emotional pain, mental pain, heartbreak, things that happen to us in our lives. Somebody breaks up with us, an animal, a pet passes away, whatever we're feeling, right? The idea of emotional pain in our lives. And, one of the things that I mentioned before on the other podcast with Josh was, is this event happening to you, or is this event happening for you? Right? And so let's break that down for a minute. If I'll use my car as an example. So my car, is having issues. The transmission's on its last leg and I'm going to have to let it go. Is that event happening to me, or is that event happening for me? And so if I define it as that event is happening to me, right, then that implies a certain series of emotions that I might feel. Frustration that, this car is having issues, frustration that I'm going to have to buy a new car, whatever the case is, right? Maybe I don't have the money right now, or maybe I do have the money, but maybe, I just feel like I don't, right? Or, maybe I just keep having cars break down on me. Could be all kinds of things that are happening, all kinds of things that would come up around the statement of this is happening to me versus this is happening for me. And so when we examine that, is this happening to me? And we sit with that. We sit with, this car is breaking down and this is happening to me. Then it feels like it is outside of our control. And it feels like it is not a gift of some form. It feels like, sometimes we think of it as punishment. We might sit there and say, why do all of our cars break down? What kind of karma did I have in a past life that leads to this issue, right? And so, we can think of it as some form of punishment. We can think of it as some form of retribution for things that we've done wrong. Why is my life in a state of lack? Why do I not have money to have nice things, right? All of these things can come up. When we think of it rather as something happening for us, so this car breaking down was for me. If I think of it as something happening for me, then we examine that. And the examination of that leads to, well, is the car breaking down actually a gift in some way, right? It's hard to think about something like that, but is it actually a gift in some way? And for me, it is. It absolutely is a gift, because I have a tendency to not spend money on myself. I have a tendency to wear things down to their last fiber. I have a tendency to only buy clothes from the thrift store. And y'all, I love thrift stores. They're fantastic. I highly suggest everybody uses their local thrift stores. But I only ever do that. Like, I literally just, my underwear, my socks, and my tank tops are from like Target or Amazon, right? Like, everything else is from the thrift store. And a lot of times those clothes break down faster. They just do. I am so sorry. I'm going to have to go on mute for a second. I hear some water running and I don't want it to come over on the recording. Please, everyone, stay on with me. Okay, thank you. I really apologize about that. All right. So the thing with, oh, I think the water's still running. My gosh. All right, I'm just going to let it go. It is what it is. First podcast, we got this. So the thing about it is, if I'm sitting here and I'm sitting in the space of if it's happening for me, and then I recognize that I have this tendency to not spend money on myself, and I have this tendency to wear things down into the very last thread. I already described my car. It's being held on. The bumper's being held on by Gorilla Tape, right? Like, this thing's a 2007. It's been sitting in the sun its whole life. It's in a sad state. The car's ready to retire, right? And so I sit there and I wear everything down to the last little thread of it, and I never spend any money on myself, and I never really spoil myself, and I never do anything just for me. And this is such an incredible gift that I've been given, because now I have to. Now I have to do something just for me. And now there's an opportunity in front of me. Do I go and buy another really old used vehicle? Or do I buy something nicer that's newer, that's gonna last for longer, that's going to, be able to get me places? And then the other thing about this is, whatever vehicle I choose, now I have a vehicle I can drive on freeways again. Now I have a vehicle I can drive outside of town. And I can go to mountains, and I can go to oceans, and I can go to beaches, and I don't have to rent a really expensive car for it. Or bum a ride with a friend and try to convince a friend to go with me, which, by the way, can be a lot of fun. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's nice to have the freedom. It's nice to have that openness, right? And so this is a gift that has happened for me. As hard as it is to let go of an old friend, as hard as uncomfortable as it is to spend money on myself, this is 100% a gift that I've been given. This is a thing that has happened for me, not to me, right? And so let's break that down in a different way, because it's really easy to see with a car. At first it isn't, but I think when I break it down, it's really easy to see with a car. But let's break it down in, what happens if my significant other decides to end the relationship? What happens when my significant other says, I'm done, it's time to move on? Right? And so now we have this immense heartbreak. We have this identity that we've had as husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever labels you guys use. We have this identity that we've had that is now ending. It's now ending. And so is that happening to you, or is that happening for you? And so if we examine that, if we really sit there and we really think about it, right? If it's happening to us, right, and we kind of break that down, then maybe we think there's something wrong with us. Why does everybody keep leaving? What do I need to change? What do I need to do? Maybe I need to be prettier. Maybe I need to lose weight, right? If it's happening to us, we think that it's outside of our control. And we don't have control over another. Everybody has free will, right? So everything really is outside of our control. But at the same time, a lot of things are more in our control than we realize. Because if that relationship was perfect, if that relationship was absolutely perfect as it is, and it was meeting everybody's needs, then everybody would stay, right? And so I want to say that you can have a healthy relationship where people still leave because a relationship may not meet their needs anymore. Maybe the person needs to go across country to a new job, to a new internship. Maybe they're ready to like try a new career. Maybe they've realized that, they actually have a different sexual identity than they originally thought. Maybe they're learning things about themselves and they need to go off and figure out who they are on their own. So healthy relationships can still end. And a healthy relationship can be a relationship in which people's needs are not being met. And it can still be healthy and non-toxic, right? And then also we can have toxic relationships where nobody's needs are being met, right? Because the needs are false needs. A need to not have somebody leave you, or a need to be taken care of, right? Like all of these things can spring up and create toxicity in our relationships. But if you have a relationship that is mutually beneficial for all parties involved and everybody's growing from it and everybody's happy with it, that's fantastic. And then the moment that it's no longer serving somebody's needs, it's okay for them to leave, right? And so when we examine, is this happening to us or is this happening for us? A lot of people will kind of be in that state of unhealthiness about that relationship. A lot of relationships are unhealthy. 50% of them end in divorce. And of the ones that don't end in divorce, quite a few of those are also still unhealthy, frankly, right? A lot of people just stay together for the kids, or they stay together because they think there's no other choices, or they stay together because they have to, or they stay together because of religious beliefs. And I'm not judging any of those. But staying together for external factors rather than an internal desire to stay together, an internal desire to continue to grow together, to continue to intentionally choose that relationship, right? That's different from being a fully healthy, fully equal relationship. And so if somebody leaves, if somebody has said this relationship is no longer for me, relationship is no longer serving the highest vision of who I am, and I need to figure out what that is. I need to move on and do something else, right? When we say that is happening for us, then it's also an opportunity for us to see our lives in a different way. It's an opportunity for us to not be attached to the identity of boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever labels. We no longer have to attach ourselves to this identity. It's no longer part of our ego, no longer part of how we define ourselves. I don't come out and say, "Hi, I'm Devah, so-and-so's wife," right? I have my own life, I'm a three-dimensional person. I have my own personality, my own intelligence, my own value system, my own quirks. I'm human, completely 100% human, and an individual, and I have an individuated consciousness. And so sometimes we can get, attached. Sometimes we can get a little too attached. Sometimes a healthy relationship can turn unhealthy over time through those attachments. And so somebody leaving us can actually be an opportunity for us to decide something differently for ourselves. Or it can be an opportunity for us to decide the same thing for ourselves. We can say, I really love being in a relationship. So I'm going to take some time. I'm going to heal. I'm going to make sure that this is exactly what I want. I'm not just going to jump into the next thing. I'm going to take a little bit of time, make sure this is exactly what I want, make sure this aligns with who I am. But one of my, values, one of my goals, one of the highest vision of who I am involves having a close, mutual relationship with somebody else, having a close intentional relationship with somebody else, where somebody is the mirror reflection of me and I am the mirror reflection of them. And through that mirror reflection, we can see ourselves and learn to grow, right? Because that's really the point of relationships. That's really the point of relationships, is our own personal growth. And so we can see pain and we can see heartbreak and we can see these things and we can understand there's actually sometimes an aspect of it that gives us something new, that gives us an opportunity to see ourselves in a different way. Pain and heartbreak can be a catalyst for our own personal growth, right? They can be a catalyst for our own personal growth. They're not happening to us. There are things that are happening for us. And when we can see them like that, we don't have to get so caught up in the pain and the heartbreak cycle. We can allow it to flow. We can allow ourselves to feel it. We can allow ourselves to experience grief. We can allow ourselves to experience sadness. It's time to let something go. It's not always easy to do that, right? Grief is important. Feeling the grief is important. But getting stuck in it, wallowing in it, that's what keeps us there for months and years and years and decades. There are people who are still grieving something that happened to them decades ago. And I'm not talking about grieving the loss of someone and how, time ebbs and flows. And, my grandfather died 10 years ago. And every now and then I think about it and it still brings a small tear to my eye. I'm talking about being so deep and so wallowing in that for decades that it impacts your daily life. And a lot of people live like that. A lot of people live like that. Without Josh here, it's hard for me to go on mute and take a sip of water. So I'm doing my best. There are so many comments. I can't wait to get into these when I'm done. And so if we can accept that all of this is happening for us and not to us, that all of this is a catalyst for our own growth, then maybe we can accept that we're actually unconsciously, as we might be, making our reality. And I don't mean that we choose the events of our reality, though sometimes we do that too, right? I might have, on an unconscious basis, chosen for my car to break down because it's really time for me to start accepting abundance in my life, and it's time for me to start spending on myself, and it's time for me to start nourishing myself in that way. And so maybe unconsciously I chose, hey, it's time for the car to break down, right? And while this is kind of an advanced spiritual concept, there's a lot of evidence, there's a lot of metaphysical evidence that everything around us is made up of vibration and frequency, right? The cup of water I was just drinking out, the microphone I'm talking on is made up of vibration and frequency. And we create the visual and tactile representation of that vibration and frequency on the order of, 1734, I've heard different numbers, trillions of times per second, right? The fact that my eyes are open means that I can see the camera and I can see the monitor and I can see my laptop, right? And in those moments when I'm not observing it, in the moments when I'm in bed, it's the whole Schrodinger's cat situation, right? When I'm not looking at it, does it still exist, right? These are questions that scientists are trying to answer right now. And so I could have unconsciously modified the vibration and frequency of my vehicle to break down at a perfect time in which it's time for me to nourish myself by actually spending money on myself, by actually allowing myself to get out of the city, by having the freedom of going to where I'd like to go, right? And so when you think about that, when I sit here and examine that question, is it happening to me or is it happening for me? When I really examine that question and then I think about, that I'm making my reality, that I could potentially be making that event that happened. Perhaps I made that event so that it could happen for me, right? So that way it could be a gift for me. And so we can actually make events that happen in our lives that are triggering because it's time to heal certain emotions. I have a lot of issues around food insecurity. I spent a little bit of time homeless. And I have a lot of issues around food insecurity, even regardless of that. A lot of things, that kind of happen in my childhood related to food. I have a lot of dietary restrictions. And y'all, I've been working on myself for like really in-depth working on myself for a couple of years. I'm super zen, like almost 100% of the time. Anything can happen, and I'm like, I'm in the moment, I'm going with the flow, it is what it is. And I've done a lot of work in this way. And a couple of weeks ago, I ordered some Chipotle and I ordered tacos. And it came with flour tortillas instead of the hard shell tacos. And I'm gluten free. I have celiac. And so I couldn't eat it. And all of a sudden, I'm noticing in myself this bubbling up of emotion. And I'm like, oh man, this is really triggering to me because of the food insecurity, right? It's really triggering to me. And then I sat there with it. And I was like, well, if this is triggering to me, then I'm really glad this happened because it's given me an opportunity to address trauma that I haven't addressed. It's given me an opportunity to heal another part of myself because if I'm reacting to it out of fear or lack or frustration or anger, then it's an opportunity for me to heal a part of myself, right? That is still responding in that way about issues related to food. And it was such an incredible moment, right? To sit there and realize that because I have done so much work. I've healed so much trauma. I've had so many triggers released. And I sat there with it and I was like, wait, when was the last time I really had to sit like this? Right? And it was probably a month and a half, 2 months prior. So I had been so zen for a good solid, let's say 45 days. I don't really know, but let's say a good solid 30 to 45 days. And not reactive to anything. And it was such a neat moment, honestly, to react to Chipotle of all things, because it gave me an opportunity to see how far I've come, how far I've grown. It was wonderful. And then I healed it and I allowed it to move through and I allowed it to move on. And then I made myself a different meal, right? And so I could say that I chose to get to the wrong order. Unconsciously, my higher self, myself, somewhere within me, somewhere within, whatever this is, chose to get the wrong order so I would have that healing moment. So I would be able to clear up a lot of the food insecurity trauma. So I'd be able to work through the emotions related to that. It was awesome. It was so cool, right? And so we can, in fact, choose things that are happening in our lives. And then anytime we're feeling the emotion, anytime we're feeling the reaction, the response, even if the reaction and the response is normal, like sadness or grief, it's an opportunity for us to sit with that and really just understand it and allow it to flow and allow it to be. And then recognize at some point when we're ready, what is the gift that this is giving us? What is the gift here? And it could be months before we're ready to see it. There could be really tragic things that have happened in our lives, and it can take a lot of healing, and it can take a lot of processing. I'm by no means minimizing the process. But when we're ready, being able to see what comes out of that, being able to see where we can go next and who we are now, because that identity is gone. And because the identity is gone, as sad as it may be, because the identity is gone, we now have an opportunity to choose who we are a different way. We now have the opportunity to experience something else in our lives, to experience ourselves in a different way. And that's really what using pain and heartbreak as a catalyst for our own personal growth is, right? It's examining, do I have any triggers? Do I have any emotions stored in the body? Do I have any emotions that I'm wallowing in that I need to let through, that I need to grow, that I need to let go? Do I need to see a therapist? Do I need help with these things? Right? Do I need to go out with friends that nourish me and not friends that drain me, right? All of these things that we need to examine about ourselves and who we are. And when we do that, then we can fully sit with that and fully process it and fully understand it. And then we can look at the ways that this has happened for us and not to us. And then when we fully examine that and we fully process that, and then we can decide who we are now, right? Who we are in the face of what just happened. How are we going to choose the highest vision of who we are now? What is it that is now available, that is now open to us? What is it that we've learned from this experience? What is it that we've always wanted to try that we couldn't try before? In what way was that limiting us? Right? In what way was that limiting our highest expression of ourselves? And so that's really how we can use those concepts on a regular basis. And I think that's really it. So I would love to go through the comments now and respond to any of them. And especially if you guys have questions, I'm going to do my best to do that. I'm moving my computer closer. That's why it looked like it was kind of zooming here. And, and I think that's going to be the end of this once I go through all these amazing comments. Thank you guys so much for all this engagement. So Elaine says, I think it is good to be true to yourself, and sometimes we can feel upset or disappointed, but remember to ask why before you react to the feeling, and that it is a good way to pause and regroup. 100%, right? You can notice that you're upset and disappointed. You can notice that, but reacting to upset and disappointment, because we often react to sadness with anger. We often react to fear with anger. And instead of we notice the sadness and the fear, instead of unconsciously reacting, then we can get support and help for that. We can get support and help from ourselves. We can get support and help from the person who's with us, right? So instead of unconsciously reacting, last night there was someone in my car with me and I said, I'm feeling a little sad about this, right? And she was very supportive. She was very supportive in that moment, and she really understood where I was coming from. So you are 100% right on. James says, 2 has an emotional weight to it, while 4 suggests a benefit. Yeah, so is it happening to us or is it happening for us? That's exactly right. And then Elaine wrote, life is so traumatic for so many people, especially those who live on the margins of a living wage and the pressure life creates. It is hard to stay positive in those struggles, yet positive visualization to a better future and planned ideas of how to find a better paying job or career is needed. I hope that your message spreads. Thank you so much, Elaine. I appreciate that. And she says, it is not easy to find calm and understanding. Even in crisis, you can still choose how to respond. Exactly. And one of the things that can really help us with that is meditation, right? And it doesn't have to be just meditation. It's kind of a loaded word. People are like, oh, I can't meditate, or I hate guided meditations or whatever. It can just be conscious contemplation. In fact, for a good year, even after I had my spiritual awakening, I still had a hard time with meditating. It was still a thing that I couldn't do, not easily. And I spent a lot of time journaling, a ton of time journaling. And I would write, such and such happened today. And then I would start to write, this is how I felt about it. And then I would keep writing and I would keep writing. And then I would realize that it comes from this like unconscious place. And I would go into, healing the unconscious place in my childhood and the trauma and whatever it was. And working through consciously healing that and getting support for that however I needed. Again, I'm a proponent of somatic therapy. Hold on. When you talk so much, your mouth gets dry. I'm a proponent of somatic therapy or somatic psychotherapy, where you work with something being stored in the body as well as something being stored, in the mind, and integrating the two, because we're here to have a physical experience, right? And a lot of people try to either escape the body or they try to escape the mind. And so being able to have that integrated approach is excellent. If you can't afford a somatic psychotherapist, dancing through an emotion is incredible. Doing walking meditations. A walking meditation is literally you just walk, you put your phone down, you just walk calmly and quietly. You just notice what's around you. You let thoughts come in, you think them, you let them flow out. Um, you know, you can graduate eventually to having a calm mind, but most people are not there immediately. And that can actually lead to a lot of frustration thinking that we have to have a calm mind, right? Doing that work allows you to become more and more conscious of your unconscious reactions. And it allows you to become more and more aware of, oh, hey, I'm having a feeling right now. And I need to go sit with and understand the feeling before I put that on other people. So you are 100% right, Elaine. James asked, are they false needs or is a need in general a mask of an issue? That's a really good question, and maybe one I might answer in a future podcast because it feels like a longer conversation, but I like that question. Elaine says, Gary Zukov has a great book about finding what our responses are rooted in and from, is insecure or need to create an illusion of security or strength or superiority or etc. Wonderful. I'll definitely look that up and see if it's something that I want to put in the description of this video. Thank you so much. And James says, is saying that we make our own reality, is that just another way of saying perception differs from person to person? That's a good question. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no. Because we literally do. Oh, he has an example, so let me read the example. For example, I'm enjoying myself and time feels like it went by in a flash, rather than I'm bored. So bored. This is like the longest hour ever. Right? And then Elaine responds with, I think we each perceive the world around us from our own vantage point. So yes, it is part relative to one's perspective and valuation of self and others and events. What I was trying to say with the making our own reality is that we literally make physical objects, because the physical objects, this laptop that I'm recording this on, that I'm streaming this on, is vibration and frequency, right? This pen is vibration and frequency. Also, it's pink. Pink is awesome. And so when we make our own reality of vibration and frequency, we're doing this entirely unconsciously. And this is what metaphysics, or this is what physicists are a lot of physicists are studying right now, is how a particle under observation behaves differently than the particle behaves when it's not under observation. And so when it's under observation, an electron behaves like we expect it to. But when we stop looking, the electron does something entirely different. So again, if nobody is in this room, if nobody is in this office, does all of this cease to exist when nobody's here to observe it? And it only begins to exist when I open up the door, right? I don't know. I have no way of finding out, because the only way I ever see the office is when I'm observing it, right? And so that's really what I meant by that. And as a collective consciousness, as the 8 billion people in the world, we have come up with ways that we are perceiving the world to be. It's very possible that we have created the plastic in the ocean through our own thinking that there is plastic in the ocean. And I'm not saying that it's easy for us to resolve. I think if we can get, like, let's say 3 or 4 million people all together meditating at once, we could probably make all the plastic in the ocean go away. But getting a lot of people convinced to do that is going to take a lot of effort, right? Like, that's a huge amount of people. And I don't actually know how many it could take. It might take a lot more than that. So collectively, we have decided there's a huge plastic problem in our ocean, and so therefore it exists. That's a lot of what physicists are working through right now and really trying to understand and really trying to measure. At the same time, plastic does exist in the ocean. So I'm not saying that it doesn't. It does exist. And is there a way that we can remove it beyond, current scientific methods? Is there a way that we can remove it by thinking differently about it, by choosing to create a different reality? And that is a very distinct possibility, and one that a lot of more Eastern Eastern mystics and gurus have talked about over the years. This isn't as common in Western spirituality, but it is definitely something that I think would be good for us as a collective to begin to consider and to begin to grow into. And the last comment is, James says, traditional therapy is too mechanistic. Somatic therapy shows the connective effects between the mind and the body. It's a very good comment. So anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this. I am so glad so many people were on here. Thank you so much for all the interaction. You guys were fantastic. Hopefully you join me next week. And yeah, just incredibly grateful and love you all. And thank you everyone for coming. So talk to you all later. Bye.